never smoke the dizzy, but we can always share some disease. It's just a cup in time. This song doesn't have to rhyme. Life's all of us, not every moment we can be feeling fine. I wanna share a moment, just a second if you will, maybe even a cup of thrill. We could share this performance. It's tea time, come sit with me.
Well, welcome guys, Miss Liz in the house, and today I have Isabel Reddy in the house, and we're going to talk about the Buffalo Creek incident and her book that's called That You Remember. We're going to get deep into that conversation with her book, but today's tea that we're serving is trustworthy, enthusiastic, and accomplished. That is the tea that we are serving today on the Tea Time with Miss Liz. But before we get started, you guys know how Miss Liz rolls. Get over to all those platforms: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, all those good platforms, and all the podcast apps out there, Spotify, Podbean, Listen Notes, all those good notes. Give those a like, follow, and subscribe, and get these tea times out there because they do make a difference for the guests and for people that resonate with all of the stories that come to the tea time table. So let's get started with disclaimer and then a beautiful intro, and then we're going to get Isabel Reddy in here, and we're going to spill some tea together. Disclaimer for Miss Liz's Tea Time live show. Miss Liz's Tea Time is a global platform dedicating to sharing real-life stories, diverse perspectives, and meaningful conversations that inspire awareness, healing, and connection. I'm Miss Liz is going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment during the live broadcast, please grant StreamYard permission to display your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that all the content brought forward during any Tea Time show is presented in good faith. However, discussions may include opinions, beliefs, and perspectives that do not necessarily represent the views of Miss Liz or the Tea Time platform. Information shared by guests is based on their own experiences and is perceived to be accurate at the given time of airing. All guest viewers and participants are responsible for using their own good judgment when considering any action or decisions that may relate to these discussions. Some episodes may cover sensitive topics, including but not limited to trauma, abuse, grief, mental health, and other emotionally triggering subjects. Listeners and viewers' discretion is strongly advised. Tea Time with Miss Liz is an open discussion forum designed to offer insight, inspire awareness, and create connection. It is not a substitute for professional, medical, legal, or therapeutical advice. If you require professional support, please seek assistance from qualified professionals or trusted resources in your area. If you have any questions regarding this disclaimer or the content of this discussion, you are welcome to contact me, aka Miss Liz, directly at my email at bookingmissliz@gmail.com or check out my link tree, Miss Liz's Tea Time. By choosing to participate in, comment on, or view these live shows, you acknowledge and accept this disclaimer. Your participation is entirely voluntary. Miss Liz welcomes you to join the conversation with an open heart, and if at any time you feel this platform is not right for you, I respect your wishes and decision and welcome you back whenever you're ready. Tea Time with Miss Liz is serving truth and awareness one cup at a time. Well, welcome to Tea Time with Miss Liz, where stories are not just told, they are remembered, honored, and carried forward. Today's guest brings us into a chapter of history that many have never fully seen, yet one that changed thousands of lives forever. Please join me in welcoming Isabel Reddy, author of the powerful debate novel, That You Remember. Isabel's work is inspired by 1972 Buffalo Creek disaster in the Apologist. I'm going to get her to say that word. I can't pronounce it. One of the deadliest floods in U.S. history. A tragedy where a coal slurry dam collapsed, taking 125 lives, injuring over 1,000, and leaving thousands more without homes. Most of those lost were not minors, but families, women, children in their homes, living their everyday lives. What makes Isabel's story even more personal is her connection to this world. As the daughter of a former coal company executive, she brings a rare and balanced perspective, telling the story from both sides of the industry. After receiving her late father's desk diaries, Isabel began a journey that would take her over a decade, interviewing survivors, walking the land, sitting in homes, listening to stories that were never meant to be forgotten. Her novel blends facts and fiction, romance and tragedy, but at its care. It's about people, about community, about resilience, and about the importance of remembering, even when it hurts. So grab your cup and lean in. Today's tea time is about history, humanity, and the voices that still deserve to be heard. Let me get Isabel in here and let's spill some tea together. Welcome, Isabel.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Now, Isabel, can you pronounce that in that place? I can't pronounce it.
Appalachia Mountains. Yeah, the Appalachian Mountains. Yes.
So,
and thank you for asking, because a lot of people don't know how to pronounce that. And they said, when I went to those regions, they said, and if you don't pronounce it properly, Appalachian, they'll throw an Appalachia.
oh, well, there you go. You get an Appalachia.
That's how to remember. You don't want to throw an Appalachia.
I like that. Appalachia. So, Isabel, can you start our tea time today with who you were as a little girl and who you are now as a grown woman?
Who I was as a little girl?
Yeah. We want to get to know you a little bit before we get into this story.
Oh, a daughter of a coal executive, 5 siblings, and spent a lot of time outside, crawling under trees, building forts with my 2 brothers, riding bicycles.
And who are you today?
Animals, and love the outdoors.
And who are you today, Isabel?
Today, I'm a writer. I call myself a writer. I do have my debut novel, That You Remember. And as you said, that blends fact and fiction. So it's historical fiction. I have been a scientific writer and for my business. And also I write nonfiction. So I've written for a number of newspapers, guest columnist for newspapers.
Awesome. So, Isabel, let's get into your tea, and then we're going to get into your book. I'm going to pull up your book so you can explain the beautiful cover on it and that as well, and how it came all together. But the tea that you gave me was trustworthy and today I'm stuttering. Enthusiastic and accomplished were the 3 words that you gave me for your tea. So, why did you give me those 3 words?
Oh, I think that they represent who I am: trustworthy, enthusiastic, and accomplished.
So do those words sit deep in the heart, or for you as an individual?
Yeah, I think that those words are extremely important to me as for who I am and for the people that I respect in my world.
So, Isabel, I'm going to pull up the book. If you just want to explain the cover and how it came about and all that good stuff, and then we're going to get into the story a little deeper.
Sure. The cover, excuse me, the cover shows the juxtaposition of the coal industry, the extraction industries from which we have gotten our energy and built our country and fought and won world wars through the use of coal. So it's extremely important in our history. And then where does it come from? It comes from multiple places in the US and around the world, but a lot of the bituminous coal comes from the Appalachian Mountains. So we're talking about a strip of mountains in the east of the Mississippi that run from Pennsylvania, that go into Virginia, that are in West Virginia, and some Tennessee and Kentucky also. Those are the Appalachian Mountains.
So in the background, I see like the different swirls of the blue. Is that representing the mountains?
Yes, the Blue Ridge Mountains, and they look blue when you go see them, the blue and the clouds. Yes, that's.
Well, I'm going to pull the book down, but I'm going to pull it up a couple of times during our conversation so people can check out the book and all that good stuff. Great. But what first pulled you towards the story of the Buffalo Creek disaster, and when did you realize it had to become a novel?
I came upon an essay called Everything in Its Path by Kai Erikson in around 1999. And that's where I found out that the Buffalo Creek disaster, and the responsible coal company was Pittston Coal. And I knew that my father had worked for Pittston. He quit in 1966, I resigned, and he started just as a coal broker. So he was never overseeing a company. But when I looked into it, there were no fiction stories on this. And I was teaching at the time, and I had my students develop essays on it and pictographs and do a whole project on it. And we really explored it. So when I received my father's desk diaries around 2001, that's when the two ideas gelled. And here I had these primary documents of my father as a president in the coal industry, a coal executive. And I had lived in North Carolina, very close to the Appalachian Mountains and very close to Kentucky and West Virginia and Tennessee. They border. And so I really felt like I could depict people from this region also. So I put it together.
So how long did it take you to put the book together?
It took me 10 years to publish the book. Yeah. I was a lot of on the ground interviews, a lot of travel, and I even went as far as the UK. So there was a lot of coal mining in the UK, and particularly Wales. And I've been inside coal mines. And yeah, it just, that's what it took to write it. Yeah.
We have a question here for you about the survivors. Just looking for it right here. You interviewed survivors in their homes, churches, and communities. What did those conversations teach you that the books and archives never could?
How much the people love and identify with their land, with where they're from, with their home, with those mountains, and also the pride that they have in coal mining. It's part of their history. You could hardly find anyone who isn't connected to the coal industry, no matter where you are. I certainly didn't. So my main source of information, one of them, she was married to somebody who was on Black lung disability, but he helped with the disaster recovery. And there he contracted walking pneumonia and passed away. And from her, I learned, probably on my first day there interviewing her in her home, the tears were just right there. And when you go to the memorial events for the Buffalo Creek disaster, you see grown men cry at the podium. I mean, it was a very, very devastating trauma to go through. And really what the people that live there want is that we do remember it. And that's why I've titled my book, That You Remember. It's important to remember so that it never happens again, that kind of thing, where companies put profits over people.
You know, and we have so much of that going in society, profit over people. So your book is a good book to get for all the listeners out there. Check out this book. This is based on a true story. You know, when I did my research on the book and that, Isabel, I found that there was a lot of heart put into this book. There was a lot of stories and deep meaning. What is a misconception that people don't understand about the coal mines?
Yes, I think that it is perhaps the many people's point of view. You know, why don't we just not do coal mining? Coal mining is dirty. Coal mining is dangerous. Let's do green energy and things like that. But I think it's important to remember that the coal industry and what people have given to be a coal miner or married to a coal miner has, you know, a significant part of our history. That, as I say, it's funded the steel industry. It's helped us win world wars. And up until recently, probably almost a third, 33% of every light in the average house in America was turned on from coal. You know, we have been hugely reliant on this industry, yet people don't know very much about it and the sacrifices the people in those regions have made, personal sacrifices and losses.
There's so many blue collar jobs out there that people don't understand, right? The heart and the passion, people putting their families, you know, sacrificing their families for these jobs and that as well. That's what I got from this story.
Well, I will have to correct you a little bit there. And I think that's an important point to bring up. When my book was set in 1970, this was a region where they had fought and won many benefits. They had gotten black lung benefits. They had a very good salary where these people were living good quality, middle American lives. They had 2 cars in the garage. They had air conditioning. This was a time where the unions were strong and they had acquired a lot of benefits for the coal miner. And in fact, that's why there's so little written about this segment of the coal industry. You hear a lot about the coal wars in the 30s, and they were fighting to be able to join a union. But this is when the unions were strong. And they were living a very comfortable American lifestyle.
Well, so much has changed, right? Because now we're considered the poverty, like those jobs are considered the poverty lines. Where back in the 70s, those were the middle class people that were living. And thank you for bringing that to my attention.
But even today, no, it's not poverty. Quite frankly, many young people go into it and can make a very decent wage. It's probably a pull to not go to college because you can start in as a minor and get a very decent wage and provide for a family, buy a house. It's a very good wage right now. There are just fewer and fewer jobs because the big machinery has taken over and strip mining and that kind of thing. But no, it's a career with a lot of benefits and a lot of pull for many people.
We have a couple comments coming in. I'm just going to pull them up. We also have a question here for you, Isabel. Amazing insight. Can storytelling really heal deep emotional wounds?
I think the answer is yes, on many levels. Also for the writer, I mean, I didn't go through this, but the people that I met absolutely wanted their story told and felt that was very important. And that's why year after year, they have a memorial on February 26, 1972. They have a memorial. I've been to the 40th and the 50th. I was just a speaker at the 54th. I think it does. It brings people together. They comfort each other. So telling these stories and keeping it, I mean, they've had to do a lot to educate young people coming up into high school because they didn't really know what the Buffalo Creek disaster was. And so they gathered the photos and put them all on the walls of the high school to remember. You see, it was 125 people killed, largely women and children in their homes. So these weren't miners who had elected to go into the mine and were paid. The miners are actually very safe. These were impoundments where the slurry was so big that it breached and created a 30-foot tidal wave that wiped out a 10-mile hollow, killing people in their homes on a Saturday morning. As I say, mostly women and children.
Wow.
Yes.
When this story was brought to my attention, I hadn't even heard of it. So I want to thank you for writing this book and bringing it to my attention because I love history and I love finding out about incredible stories like this because those are the stories that need to be told, the stories that have not been remembered. And I like the title of your book. I'm just going to pull it up for the new listeners that are tuning in so you can they can see it again. We're talking about That You Can Remember book. Isabel Reddy has written this book about the Buffalo Creek incident.
Disaster.
Disaster. You mentioned February 26th. Is that an annual event that happens every year, Isabel?
Well, that's the date that it happened, February 26, 1972. So that every year on that date or around that date, they have a memorial event where people come from all over who were in it, affected by it, who loved ones died. But you asked about my muse, why I wrote it, what prompted me. I need to tell you because it's very much connected to the title. I saw on the internet a survivor was interviewed and she was going to read her poem. And when she read her poem, it was all about, I can't forget, and I can't remember. It was all about forgetting and remembering. But at the end, she said, remembering is the sanity. And I really wrote the book for her. I mean, when I heard that poem, I made her my protagonist, Sarah. I made Sarah look like her. I really feel like I wrote the book for her.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because I was going to get into that, because I did find that poem on your website that I will have up. I found the poem, and it says, I can't remember, I can't remember, I swear, damn it, I can't forget, is what's on your website. So, and that really drew a lot of attention to me, because it was like, we got to remember these stories. We got to remember the history. We got to be told what has happened and all the incredible lives that have been lost. We got to talk about the everyday person that is losing their lives from disasters like the Buffalo Creek. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. We have a question here for you, Isabel, is what challenges did Isabel face while writing about personal memories?
Well, I do have a character. So I have two timelines, 2019, when a woman inherits her father's death diaries, a little bit like me, and then it flashes back to 1970. Largely, that's where the book takes place. There's a taboo love affair between a coal executive and a young coal hollow waitress. So there are some personal memories in the novel, but not too many. But, one is that this person in 2019 who inherits her father's death diaries and finds a little piece of paper that says Sarah on it and wants to find out if her father had a romantic relationship with someone, because she really just wants to connect with her late father. You will find when reading the book that she knows nothing about the coal industry, and she doesn't know what a tipple was. And that was true for me. So when I called to make reservations to try to go there and meet people, they said, well, just go a mile past the tipple. And I said, well, I can figure that out, right? A tipple, I'll figure it. I said, sure, that's fine. And then I didn't know anything about what was a tipple and what wasn't a tipple. And the machinery and the coal, the cable cars and the giant things that were down there, it all looked like it could be a tipple to me. So I really didn't know a lot about the coal industry until I went down there.
What did it teach you, Isabel, to go down there?
What did it teach me? Well, as I say, it taught me I had really never met a lot of people from that region, and they were so kind and so generous with their time, so open. I come into my home. As I say, went to church with them, their families. They just couldn't have been more open and welcoming to tell me and to cry and share personal stories. And, at one point when I was leaving, and I'm saying this is loosely based on the Buffalo Creek disaster. I'm not telling their story. I am telling what happened, as we can see is a possible problem with any sort of corporation that doesn't comply with regulations and laws. So I said it in Kentucky, and I changed the year. So I was driving home one time, and I got lost, and this woman pulled up and said, oh, can I help you? And she not only gave me directions, then she gave me her son's cell phone number, because if I got far enough, I would be out of reach to her, but I could call her son. And the families, in my experience, were incredibly well blended, were very connected. So it was a really lovely experience to meet those people.
Well, Isabel, it's such a beautiful conversation. How did Isabel start her storytelling journey? How old were you when you started telling stories?
Oh, my storytelling journey? Well, I've been writing since I was about 12. I have written since I was 12. So I was a journaler. I have stacks and stacks of journals. I loved writing in college. And then, as I say, I had a job, multiple jobs as a clinical writer, and did scientific writing in the clinical research industry. And then I got into nonfiction. So I wrote essays for multiple newspapers.
So, Isabel, what motivates you to write?
I think writing is transformative. So it transforms me as I write. And I actually, in journaling, I realized I was learning things by the writing process that I didn't know when I picked up the pen that night or what have you. So, and it helps to record the beautiful things of my life that I want to remember. So it's a journey. Writing is a journey in a way. You don't always know where you'll end up when you pick up the pen.
Well, we have a question that came in here. We talked a little bit about this a few minutes ago, but what inspired the story behind Buffalo Creek that you remember?
Well, what inspired the story? Well, as I say, I found out about it. Then I knew that my father had worked for that company, and I really wanted to write that story for the people that were affected by it. When I met them, when, you know, on the ground interviews. And when, you know, the computer has a lot on the Buffalo Creek disaster that anyone can pull up and see. This was a really devastating experience, and very few people know about it. But the bigger thing is so that we keep this in mind when corporations are making decisions that can jeopardize the people that live in those regions. And if you saw the show The Crown, if anyone saw the show The Crown, season 3, episode 3, they depict Aberfan, which a similar event happened in Aberfan, Wales, where a slag heap, a kind of slurry and slag heap, slid and suffocated a school full of children who had just sang a song and were going to go on spring break. And so that was depicted in The Crown. Again, I feel like we do need to tell these stories so that we, you know, have laws that protect people when corporations are, you know, doing things that could be risky.
And Isabel, how do you approach painful or difficult memories in writing?
Well, I think the stories need to be told. And in my novel, I used the actual survivors published their own book. And I not only have that book, I was given the audio files of the recordings that they made door to door of the survivors. So I heard their voices. I wove a lot of those true stories into my novel. So a lot of the scenes with the flood, which is at the end of the novel, but the suspense is, you know, it's going to happen. You just don't know who survives. Really happened to people. One I'll mention is The Miracle Baby, and A Miracle Baby is Carrie Albright. He was written up by the Reader's Digest. I wove that story in where this mother was about to drown. She was being carried away, and she threw the baby trying to reach the shore. And then the baby was found with their head in the mud and just their legs, and was saved and rescued. So these difficult things, I put them in the novel.
Wow. And what do you want the readers to get from this story, Isabel?
You know, we can read something in the newspaper or see it on the news or in the computer, as it were. But for me, and I think for most people, then we say, oh, my pasta is boiling over. Oh, my dog needs to go out. And bing, it's out of our mind. But when you read in fiction, you walk a mile in their shoes, as my aunt used to say. I think you really live it, you breathe it, you're immersed in that world for a time.
Writing this story, you said it took you 10 years. In those 10 years, what story really stood out the most besides The Miracle Baby for you?
Oh, of the victims, or of there's
the story in general. Like what really stood out to you, Isabel?
Well, you know, the woman's poem. It took 10 years because, in fact, I began it with 2 time periods, toggling back and forth. And then I had a period of years where I said, no, you can't do that. I'm just going to do 1970. And at the end, towards the end, when I was done with the novel, I went back. I actually holed up in my study. And when I came out, I had those 2 years toggled. And that's really the way I wanted to tell that story. So there were things that didn't get in the novel, one or two, but as I say, most of what you read about is from really real people, what happened to them. But one story I wasn't able to put into the novel, but I read it from the survivors' accounts, and a man put his mother-in-law, I don't know it exactly, but he put his whole family in their pear tree.
Oh.
And they survived. And they survived. And then the DOT and the rescue had cut down the tree. And there's another woman, I think she was in the post office, and she just prayed and prayed and prayed so hard, and she survived. I wasn't able to put her in the novel. I couldn't put all of the stories, but when you read the novel, most of what you read it is very, very much based on fact.
So Isabel, do you plan on writing a second novel?
People have asked for a sequel, but this was a standalone novel. I'm working on a different novel now, but not a sequel.
We have a question here for you. Can storytelling change the way we see past experiences?
Can storytelling... That's an interesting question. I do think that we learn from our writing, and when we delve in through writing, we can uncover things that we didn't know, or we can sort of put together things as we write them, even of our own past, things that we hadn't actually connect the dots. So yeah, I think that's true.
What advice would you give to someone starting their healing journey?
I think that writing is a wonderful way to start your healing journey, and photographs, if you have them, and then maybe get a writing buddy if you can, or share it with somebody who really just wants to hear your story and encourage you.
Storytelling, I find, is what's going to bring history back. It's going to bring those stories back, like the stories that you're writing about. We have a question here for you. Do you have another book plan? And you were just mentioning that you're working on one. Do you want to share a little bit about that book, or is that the top secret?
I will share that it is, in fact, a very personal kind of book. So the novel that I'm writing now is a little bit of a retelling of a Jane Austen book, which I didn't even realize it was so close to this Jane Austen book until my advisor at Goddard, where I got my MFA, said, this sounds like a retelling, but it's also a very personal story. So I love that I'm doing kind of both. And there have been some popular sort of retellings recently, James by Percival Everett, or Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, based on David Copperfield. So those do well.
So Isabel, your father once worked in the coal industry. How did that personal connection shape the way you approached this story?
Well, when you read the 2019 character, her name is Alina, and she grew up in coal executive. So that's very realistic. That was me. I knew nothing about the coal industry. In those days, children, were to be seen and not heard, whatever. We were supposed to go out and play. So the only thing my father told me about the coal industry was turn off the lights if they weren't buying his coal, and turn on the lights if they were buying his coal, if it's whatever. So I mean, that's actually a real depiction of what it was like for me to grow up. But the other thing was, in the period that I write, 1970s, when the environmental laws were really coming into play and they were getting stronger, and the regulations were really going to start to have some teeth, that these big companies who were acquiring little companies were going to have liability because they're buying the little companies that weren't managed well. And suddenly they have a problem on their hands. And that's what's depicted in my book. And I think my father got out of the, resigned from this large coal company because he saw the writing on the wall that buying up these small, mismanaged coal concerns, almost like truck mines, was a liability. And in fact, that's, what happened.
And it's true, right? We grew up in a time where we were to be seen but not heard, and not to ask questions. Mom and dad put the food on the table, you ate what was on the table, you followed the rules. We kind of didn't talk about mom and dad's job or work, right? Or the money or finances and stuff like that, like we do today.
Yeah, you don't get dessert. There was one family, not mine, but there was one, you don't get dessert unless you clean your plate and turn it over. So that's where your dessert goes, right?
Right, because conserving in the dishwater, and the soap and cleaning and all of that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I think we should go back to some of those ways. Less dishes to wash as well. I just did the Easter dinner, and I was just like, wow, look at all these dishes. We take so much for granted. Back in the day, there was so much connection and so much family and bonding. Have you seen the change in the families over the years? You said you just spoke at the 50th Fourth and annual event. Have you seen any changes in the families?
Well, one thing that does come to my mind that I haven't mentioned yet, it's in some of my quotes, but I learned from the woman who lost her husband in the recovery. She said, always kiss a minor goodbye. And so that figures into my novel as well. I don't know that I've seen a lot of change, but I have seen that it can be very hard for some people to even go to these memorial events. Because I talked to a gentleman at the 40th, and I wasn't going to ask him about the disaster. I was going to ask him what kind of car they drove, what beer they drank, Pabst Blue Ribbon, PBR. And then all of a sudden in that conversation in this cafeteria in the Mayan High School, he said it was raining that night. And he told me the story. And I was told he never came to another memorial event. So for some people, it's incredibly painful to relive that.
Well, so many lives were lost. Do you want to share how many lives were lost again for the viewers that are just tuning in?
125, mostly women and children and babies. And 4,000 plus were left without a home, without a community. It looked like a war zone. I mean, there was just nothing left. This breach of these giant, it was 130 million gallons of coal slurry, liquid coal waste that created a 30-foot wave traveling up to 35 miles an hour, spinning houses, twisting railroad ties, spinning a church, the steeple like a ping pong ball.
Wow.
And there was no evacuation warning, nothing.
Wow.
So they call this a dam, but it wasn't a dam. This was held back by bulldozed slag, all of the rock and debris you pull out of the mountain. And then the tipple is where you separate the coal from all of the slag and slate and crushed rock. So they just bulldoze that and then put all the water that they used to separate it behind it over multiple years. There were actually 3 dams. In my novel, there's just one.
Let's talk about the black lung, because you mentioned the black lung. For people that don't know what black lung is, could you share a little bit about that, Isabel?
Well, I'm not a scientific expert or medical person, so I think it's silicosis or something. So it's from inhaling the dust. There's an incredible amount of dust when you dig into the wall of a rock cave undermined. It creates tremendous dust, and even if you're wearing something, I think you're still at risk, but perhaps sometimes their equipment wasn't worn properly or thoroughly. And over the years, many miners continue today to have this problem.
Wow. I know my father worked in a sawmill for 32 years, and a lot of asbestos were in the bags. There was a lot of, back in those years in the 70s and 80s, people never knew about the danger that the workers were being put into, right? Because it was profit over people, like you mentioned at the beginning of the show. What laws and regulations have changed over the years for the workers?
What laws? Is that what you're saying? For miners?
Yeah.
Oh, methane gas and keeping the coal dust down, and there's all sorts of ones, and also benefits. But depending on the administration and politics, I think that the benefits aren't always that consistent.
We have a question here. How long did it take you to write the book? If you just want to share, we have listeners that are popping in at different times. So if you just want to share again how long it took you to write the book, and I'm just going to pull the book up again for everybody to check out this book.
Yeah. And it's thatyouremember.com. You can go there. I don't know if you've said, and there are a lot of interviews, QAs, podcasts that I've already been on, and I speak at more length at these kinds of things. It took me 10 years to write the book. It was really a journey. Took a lot of trips to the Appalachian region and West Virginia and Kentucky. And I even went to Wales in the UK to tour a mine and to get books, even poetry books written by coal miners. So I'm not a big fan of going into coal mines, and I don't think I'd do it again. But I did, and I needed to, because one of my scenes I write underground from the miner's perspective.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
So how was it to write that part of the book?
Well, after going in the mine, I have a character, Pete, who comes from Massachusetts, who is going to live with his grandpa and tries to make more money to send to his mother. So he gets a job in the coal mine. So I can put myself in his perspective, being the first time is, what is this? What is this? How come there's just one little rinky-dink light bulb? Well, that's kind of what it was like, and you go a mile into the mine and you have to go through water. And I remember thinking, oh, good, there's water on the tracks. We'll have to turn around. And then the little man car goes right through the water. And like, oh my gosh. So it was kind of fun to write, because I just wrote what it was like for me.
Well, your novel explores both sides of the coal industry, operators and workers. Why was it important to show the complexity of both worlds rather than flattening the story?
Well, I love that question. There's so many books that come out that have the good guy is the local small, no voice characters, and then the bad guy are the big industry, what have you. But my novel speaks from both perspectives and gives and pretty equal view to both, that there's good guys and not so good guys really on both sides. And the story Wall Street, I think, is a movie. There's also that idea that you can take this job and then they say to do this and do this and this, and all of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, what are they doing, and how do I back out of this, or can I change their mind? And that's what Frank, my main male character, is caught up, because Sarah is telling him these dams are very dangerous. Did you even see them? And he hadn't seen them, and his company. So I have scenes in the boardroom in the New York City high rise and how they're making decisions. And so in that way, you're seeing the perspective of both the coal hollow community and also the coal executives and how decisions are made, and also inspectors who have to go kind of in between.
And what did the big, the corporate offices learn about this disaster?
In real life or in my novel?
In your novel and in real life?
well, my novel sort of ends with the disaster, although I do have these inspectors. But in fact, this was taken up by a Washington-based law firm, and Gerald Stern won the multi-million-dollar lawsuit for the survivors and wrote a seminal book that's still being used 50 some years later in law schools called The Buffalo Creek Disaster. He wrote one of my blurbs, and he lived this experience with the survivors and won the multi-million-dollar lawsuit against Pittston. So,
well, we have a question that just came in for you, and it's one of the most striking truths about Buffalo Creek is that many of the victims were women and children, not minors underground. Why is that important for people to understand?
I think it really shows that, when we say a coal mine disaster, we think of the miners who, there's an explosion and all the women and children come running. But in fact, this happened to people who hadn't signed on, who were living in that region, who, as I say, most people were connected in some way to coal, but the people who ran the hotel, who ran the country store, who pumped gas or what have you. So it's the flip side. I mean, it's not what you would think, that these were innocent people just like you or me living in that particular region.
And so many people, as soon as they hear a miner story, they think of the miners like you just mentioned. They don't think of the families, they don't think of the children and the wives and that the sacrifices that are being made. I love that you brought up always kiss a miner goodbye, because you never know if they're coming home. You never know what could happen, right? And for these children and women, they did not know that was the end for them,
No, they didn't. But that the woman that was my main source of information, she sort of teared up and said, always kiss a miner goodbye.
I think it's important that we always kiss our loved ones goodbye, right? Because we never know what can happen.
Yes.
We have a question that just came in. Is it ever too late to start healing through memory?
No, it isn't. If you feel moved, then I think that the time is right. Or if you even wonder about it, I think that the time is right. But it's good to get a buddy or someone to help support your journey as you do it. Mm-hmm.
And we have another question. Do fragment memories still hold meaning in healing?
Well, I think that the more we write, the more we can learn. So if we have fragmented memories, put them down and write and maybe share them or talk to people that are related. Yes, I think that they do hold them.
And another one is, how important is emotional honesty in storytelling?
Wow, what an interesting question. I think that emotional honesty in storytelling makes for very good storytelling. And a lot of people have said, and I think you said at the beginning, Liz, about heart, my story has heart. A lot of people have said that it's really got heart or what have you. So I like stories like that, and I write them. And
well, it's real and raw, right? You're getting the real story. The heart is going into the story. And that's why I asked you who you were as a little girl, because you like the outdoors and you like playing and writing and that. And that's kind of who you are today. You're still writing and enjoying the outdoors and learning about history and that. What has your storytelling throughout the years taught you about yourself, Isabel?
Well, writing fiction opens me up to so many different occupations and the people that do them. So I've loved that. So if I meet somebody who walks on steel girders in New York City, I'm like, that's so interesting. Or let me know more about that because I know this. I know this already. And I guess it's taught me that I really, but maybe it's through practice, I really can put myself in somebody else's shoes to write them. I don't think we're limited if we practice writing. So
Well, it's learning and growing, right? You learn from the story, you learn from writing and sharing the words, and you get the feedback, right? Good and bad sometimes. And you're like, oh, okay, well, maybe I'll tweak this a little bit better next time, or I'll learn something from asking that question or writing that story, you know. Uh,
Yeah.
and that's what I got from researching this book and your story, Isabel, is that I'm learning as well through this conversation. You know, um, the title that you remember is unforgettable. What does remembering mean to you in the context of grief, history, and justice?
Remembering is important. Remembering is how we can prevent something like this in the future. And maybe remembering and sharing stories is how we connect with people.
Sarah is a strong young woman longing for a different life while trying to protect her hollow. What does she represent to you beyond the page?
It's a little bit of a coming of age story, and Sarah has to grow up and realize that a little bit like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, where at first she just wants to leave her hollow, but then she realizes that it actually has all that she needs. But she has to open up to the women in her life, her sister-in-law and her best friend Patty. And she has to forgive her mother for leaving the home. Her mother abandoned the family. And that's how she grows up. So there's a lot about parent-child relationships in this too, because Alina is learning about her deceased father.
So how did you come up with the characters and the names?
Through books of the region, or, just starting to tell the story, or it sort of came out of my own personal experience, my own head. I have an Aunt Betts in there and Uncle Shorty. I have, quite a few characters. And as I say, it's a little bit of a mixture of real life from my experience, plus things I've read or things I encountered in my research.
And how do stories connect us to others on a deeper level?
Well, otherwise, if we didn't read, for instance, my novel, very few people would really understand what it's like to be in a coal community like that, and these steep hollows where you don't see the sun until midday, and the love of those mountains that you hear people talk about. So I just think it just really helps us connect with people we may never have encountered or would encounter. And for that matter, one of my editors said, I'm a city boy here, but he said that West Virginia or Kentucky, actually it's placed in Kentucky. Kentucky is almost a character because I have so many scenes of nature and being outside. Sarah and Frank meet at the river fishing. So, it can even introduce you to the world of outdoors and the trees and birds and what fish are biting and do fish bite in the winter and all sorts of things like that.
So Isabel, that you remember blends romance, tragedy, and a history so powerful. How did you balance the emotional intimacy of the characters with the scale of the disaster?
Well, the disaster happens at the end. So it's this suspense that is going to happen. And Sarah's trying to get Frank to stop it. Frank's doing what he can with the CEO to make improvements, to, try to have the dams not be so perilous. But in the meanwhile, we're getting to know people and their lives, their day-to-day lives. And Sarah and Frank both sort of have angst and what they're attracted to in each other. Perhaps it's a Bridges of Madison County kind of relationship, or where Frank sees potential in Sarah and she wants to hear that because she feels a little trapped in her life. And Frank, on the other hand, feels trapped in his life. He feels that he's trapped in his job, his home life isn't good, and maybe if he can do some good with Sarah, he can redeem himself. So you just you move along. Really, it's a character-driven novel with this suspense out there that you don't know what will happen and who will survive.
So Isabel, do you want to just read out and spell out your website for all the audio listeners that are not watching the video? And I'm going to pop up the book again for the video listeners. Again, we're talking about That You Remember. It's a novel that Isabel Reddy has written. So Isabel, if you just like to let people know where they can get this book and your website and all that good stuff.
Oh, absolutely. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your local library or bookstore. You can order it. And you can get it from the publisher, Belle Isle Books. That's a imprint of Brandy Lane Publishing out of Richmond, Virginia. And my website is thatyouremember.com. So THAYOUREMEMBER.com.
So Isabel, what final message would you have for everyone listening today and anybody that will catch the replay?
What final message? Read my novel. It's fun. It's a page turner, which is what Kirkus Review said, a page turner. Or go to my website and find out more about me, Q&As, podcasts. Lots and lots of different people from all walks of life have enjoyed my novel, which I really like that.
So, and Isabel, do you have any upcoming events that you'd like to share with us?
No, just feel free to go to my website or Brandy Lane Publishing or Belle Isle Books.
Well, I really want to thank you, Isabel, for joining me and sharing your story and your novel with my listeners out there. I want to thank all the listeners that joined in, all the amazing questions that came in from the studio and from other platforms out there. I could not do this without you guys, so I really want to just thank you. If you guys haven't subscribed to Miss Liz, check out Miss Liz's Teatimes. You will find over 600 different interviews, all topics and all walks of life on there. I just want to do a little wrap up of what today's tea time was and leave you guys with a little food for thought. And then I'll see you guys back at 7 p.m. with the second guest, and we'll do this all over again. What a deeply moving and eye-opening conversation. Isabel, thank you for honoring the voices of a community that refuse to be forgotten. Your work reminds us that behind every historical event are real people, real families, and real lives forever changed. This afternoon, we were reminded that history is not just something that happens, it is something that still lives in the hearts of those who carry it. And when we take the time to listen, to learn, and to understand, we begin to see not just the tragedy, but the resilience, the pride, and the humanity that remains. Your story shows us that even in the face of loss, communities can rebuild, reconnect, and move forward without forgetting where they came from. Here is something to carry with you after this tea time. What stories from the past are you choosing to remember? And which ones are we allowing ourselves to forget? Because remembering is not just about history, it is about responsibility. To everyone listening, may you leave this conversation with a deeper awareness of the lives behind the headlines and a greater appreciation for the strength found in communities. Until our next cup shared, keep listening, keep learning, and keep honoring the stories that shape our world today. And I'll see everybody at 7 p.m. with the second tea time of this day.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Isabel.
Thank you.